I would like to start with reading some passages from a book that has been a source of great inspiration and healing for me and a number of people I've been in a project with, language and cultural reclamation project. It's called The Land in Our Bones, Ancestral Herbalism and Healing Cultures from Syria to the Sinai by Leila K. Faghali. The earth is our first and most foundational relationship of nurturance, anchorage, and agency that secures livelihood forward. Earth is our first mother, the generous lifeline every human and non-human on this planet shares in common without exception. Our relationship with the earth is material, unwavering truth that determines our fundamental existence on this planet. And separating us from this relationship or reconfiguring and exploiting it on the occupier's terms. Colonialism interrupts our deeper contract as sacred living beings of a sacred living planet and the practical ways we have evolved, navigate, and mutually sustain life. It's just beautiful and captures a lot of the thinking and feelings that I've had for a long time. To give a bit of an introduction with my name, it's Evneeki Roufail. One thing that you were just asking around what kind of moves you, what it is that motivates you. And for me, it's very much connecting in the natural world and with people and really ideally making those connections together. So sharing the love I have in the natural world with other people and learning from other people. Learning is really something that I am so moved by, I guess. It's a real motivator for me. Like every day I think about what new thing did I learn today? And also the idea that I have a lot to share. It would be kind of hoarding for me to take in information and not share it, or take in knowledge or experiences and not share it, but it really is about sharing these with each other. In terms of like working practice, I'm seeing so much potential in bringing people together and learning together, especially around the natural world, since it is so foundational to everything, to our lives, to our identities, and that it also gives me a lot of energy. I hated school. I just put it that way. The public school system is absolutely essential and I fully support. However, the experiences I had in primary and secondary school, Catholic schools specifically, were very rigid. There's a lot of anxiety around tests. So really not conducive to learning, a positive learning environment. And I remember thinking like, I would never want to put someone else into this system. University was a much better experience. It was, I think, the first time I had teachers and professors that were encouraging and that saw potential and were able to communicate that. I think educational institutions really need a rehaul, rethinking. There's so much anxiety among young learners, students, and disconnect, I think, with what they're learning and just wanting to get it over with. Even just the physical structure of a classroom for me is not inspiring. It's very institutional. So institutions themselves, I think, on many levels, really need to fundamentally change. I am teaching a new course. The first time it's being offered in person at Algonquin College, called Land-Based Social Justice Education, which is really exciting. The basis of it for me means being able to experience learning in the natural world and being really conscious of the land where we are. In this case, Algonquin territories that are unceded, unsurrendered, stolen lands where Algonquin College resides and where many of us are living and studying and working. And so being really conscious, focusing the learning on the traditions, the cultures that come from this land and from the original people who have been stewarding this land for thousands of years. So the Algonquin Anishinaabeg people. And the amazing thing at Algonquin College is that there are incredible faculty and staff that have made themselves available to support this class in guest presentations. We had our first class around the beautiful courtyard called Ishkodewan, which means there is fire. It's a beautiful resource and space for the students and anyone involved in Algonquin College, where sacred fires are held. And so we started our first class with a sacred fire led by Carrie Potts, who's an Indigenous professor and pedagogy consultant. There's also another Indigenous pedagogy consultant, Sheila Grantham, who has also been supporting this course. And Carrie started with offering a smudge for the class and for the students. That kind of practice is specifically a land-based practice, which is really rooted in, again, the traditions and the knowledge systems of the Indigenous people of a specific land, grounding yourselves literally in learning from the people who have been here for thousands of years. So that's a really fundamental distinction of land-based education, is that it is really led with Indigenous knowledge systems to the specific land and waters where the practices are being held and learned. And in that, there is a lot of healing and learning that happens. One of the things I wanted to do is make it as experiential as possible. Yeah, you can learn a lot from reading and being in a classroom and having conversations. And you can learn so much more when you're experiencing firsthand, being in a space, partaking in ceremonies, learning from stories that are shared. So our second class was a beautiful gathering. We sat again in Ishkodewan, which is a circular space. The class was led by Anita Tanasco, who's the Indigenous Initiatives Director. Amazing person, amazing resource, who spoke about her family, their experience with residential school system. And she brought these beautiful handmade baskets and beautiful items from her community of Kitigan-Zibi, which was one of the main Algonquin communities in the region. Just hearing the stories that she had to say connected us with the place, being aware that the baskets that we were looking at and touching were made from the birch trees that grow in the region was a really, again, embodied way of learning about the culture and about the practices. Having as much experiences in the space, in the outdoor spaces as possible is really important. And there's also, it could be uncomfortable for a lot of students because it's different, sitting even in a circle could be uncomfortable. Now, classrooms are basically, you have the rows, that's the convention, and now more than ever, like everybody's behind a laptop. And so you're not even looking at each other. So sitting in a circle where you can't, like you're looking around can be really uncomfortable. I think it's a good disruption. Right. I'm learning that also as I go along to push just enough, like, the idea of going a little bit through our edges or past our edges of comfort so that we can grow, that we can learn. So it is different and disrupting in the sense of taking the learning as much as possible outside the classroom. I've also been thinking about how the grading, the stress of grades could be rethought, redone. It's a tricky balancing act between having the incentive for students to do the work, because it's still important for students to do reflecting, to demonstrate what they're learning, to demonstrate the capacities that they're gaining in the class, and for it to be taken seriously enough, especially when we're so programmed from the beginning of school that you do this for a grade. So that's been an interesting figuring out. There are different ways, like inviting the students to self-assess, to have conversations with them around that. And I'm seeing and meeting more and more people who are interested in, within the grading structure itself, finding ways of it to be a little bit more meaningful, less stressful as much as possible, so that the focus is more on the learning, and still have meaningful interactions and assignments come through. So it's still a work in progress, I think, but it is also really worth working through. A lot of schools are taking on community gardens as part of their curriculum or different nature-based learning, which is really exciting and has so much potential. You can learn so much about science, about ecology, ecosystems, cooking, and the practical skills of growing plants. We were talking about this earlier. You can have a whole series of lessons on one plant, on the tomato, and all the things that you can learn from where the tomato comes from culturally, how many kinds, it can touch on so many different core subjects. And I think there's more and more interest and practice in schools for this kind of learning, which is really hopeful. So the question about if there's a message for different educators, how they can bring nature-based or land-based practices in the learning, I think it is, if they're not Indigenous to the land where they're teaching or working or living, then it would be, I think, a really important place to start is to connect with folks who are Indigenous to the area, to learn practices from them, to learn more about the history and the realities of the space. Even if it's a walk, to bring in even small experiences or short kind of experiences. It doesn't have to be about growing a forest, which also could be an amazing practice. But if the time and the resources are limited, it could be taking a really mindful walk through a space, learning about the history and the plants in the space, the medicines that they provide, and as much as possible being really grounded in the Indigenous knowledge and traditions, being aware, learning from that, and as much as possible learning from each of our own ancestries and what we can bring in to that learning, because that's something also that I want to do more and more in the kinds of experiences that I coordinate and bring with people. Is this plant that is so meaningful to me? Why is it meaningful? And sharing these kinds of experiences together. We are the earth. An embodied relationship with the land imbues innate reverence for life and embedded knowledge of its inherent dignity. We understand all beings have a consciousness, and we are a fundamental part of the ecosystem. It teaches us how to steward life and land through intimacy with its natural cycles. Our specific landscapes have sustained our bodies and provided for our societies generationally. They have also informed every aspect of our social structures, inspired our ancestral cosmologies, narrated our stories, animated our foods and agricultural practices, intonated our languages and the rhythms of our songs, revealed our gods, and inspired every aspect of our relationship, rituals, beliefs, and identities. These places have guided every aspect of our self-determined livelihoods and cultural formation, including our understanding of ourselves and each other in the universe.